Hello you, it's me, and today we're going to talk about The Gunslinger, the first novel in Stephen King's magnum opus, The Dark Tower series, based on the Robert Browning poem The Child Roland. We're reading this along with the second book in this series as the January picks of our Stephen King year-long read-along, which you are all very welcome to join. The link to that Discord will be down below in the video description. There's going to be a few things I talk about in this video, some plot rundown, review. It'll all be marked down below on the time bar. In this book, we follow the Gunslinger, the last of his order, his world's knight protectorates, as he crosses the desert, passes through these dry, dusty backwater towns, in a world that is in the midst of a reality-melting, slow-burn apocalypse. It's coming apart at the seams. Also crossing this decaying world is a shadow from the Gunslinger's past, the Man in Black, who the Gunslinger pursues and who leaves a trail of destruction, corruption, and deadly traps to waylay our protagonist. Until the Gunslinger comes across a young boy named Jake Chambers in a way station out on the sand flats, who can't remember why or how he got there. Is Jake a trap too, or is he something else instrumental to the Gunslinger's quest? The Man in Black fled across the desert, and the Gunslinger followed. I struggle to think of a more iconic opening line to a novel. The way this sums up the story, whispers at so much, and means infinitely more on a reread than it does the first time around. This is one of the most beautiful series I've ever read, and it's one that makes me sob later on. I'd say if you were looking to get a taste of King or of King's writing, this is probably not the best place to start. It isn't very representative of the rest of his work, but one way this differs from every other series I've ever read is that the Dark Tower series references almost everything Stephen King has ever written, or that references the Dark Tower. This ties it all together. As you read this, you'll notice characters from other books, settings you've seen before, you'll hear names you recognize, you'll see the consequences and the shadows of things that happen in completely other separate novels. Going straight into this book, one of the weirdest things about it, in my opinion, and something that is instantly noticeable, is how it straddles the line between so many different genres. You might think that being a Stephen King book, this should be shelved with horror, and it often is, but I think incorrectly. I think more than anything else, this is a fantasy series that stretches out and sort of touches a lot of other genres. We're painted this picture of a gold rush-esque western setting, but then told about magic, known here as glamour, and then we're given out-of-place lines like, it was probably powered by an atomic slug, or told about ancient engines that ran on diesel. It's a fragmented world that, coupled with flashbacks to things both familiar and alien, throw us off, so we're never quite sure when or where we are. I know a lot of people are put off by book one, and honestly I can understand why. A lot is hinted at, very little is explained. There's this sort of promise that more will be revealed later on, in a bigger story of which this is a tiny part. In fact, this whole book, I think, almost feels like a prologue to a story that's just around the corner and really starts in book two. But luckily, this one's really small. The Gunslinger in this book cuts this almost mythical figure as somebody who, being as fractured and lost as he is, totally fits the weird broken landscape, which is worrying. He's incredibly memorable, he's initially mysterious. We're given tiny fragments of his past, but rather than lending to the character development of the person we see here, there's this huge disconnect between who he was and who he is, and that really leaves us wondering what the hell happened to this guy. We sort of sympathize with him a little bit, and I'm left to wonder whether, without the flashbacks, we'd be able to like him as a character at all, given some of the fucked up choices he makes here. But it's lovely having a main character who you can instantly tell is super messed up. This is a deeply flawed man, and you can tell that in this series there is going to be so much room for development and growth of his character. You see him change a little around Jake, and soften after we've only known him for a few pages. And it's clearly only a whisper, but being able to change somebody's character this early on is a testament to how strongly they're introduced. One thing I'm always surprised about with King, and that I always forget until I come to a passage that reminds me, is how well he writes children. He clearly has very concrete memories of being a kid and how kid brain works. I think it's definitely one of his stronger skills as a writer. This is a book about somebody having to decide whether the end justifies the means. This is something that happens both in the present with Roland and Jake, and in the past during Roland's childhood. And I wonder if the gunslinger has ever paused to think about what would happen if he just stopped. King describes his slow and methodical brain. Is he continuing on this quest out of habit, or a sort of rage against the dying of the light in this collapsing world? Does his quest for the tower begin as a quest for the tower? Or is it something that follows on from his need to apprehend the man in black, which is almost like a vengeance quest? Or are the two things intertwined and inseparable? It's very clear either way that the main character in this is a man obsessed. One comment King made himself about this series, about this book in the series, is that this story feels like it was written by a young man and has problems associated with that, which led to him actually revising it in 2003. And even despite this, you can really see how his style as a writer changes through the series, and how his writing ability changes, considering this series was written over the course of 20 years. To me, at least, when I read this at a young age, it almost gave me the feeling, unnoticed at the time, but very obvious looking back, that I was doing some growing up alongside this series. Spoiler stuff. Please get gone if you don't want to be spoiled. There's a passage I really love here, related to what I just said actually, where Roland says to Jake that you don't grow up all in one go. That growing up is something that happens over the course of a lot of little events, and you never know which events are pivotal until you look back on them years later. And then later in the book you get the scene with him where he duels Court and wins. And almost unnoticeably in that moment, as he's standing over Court, the narrator stops calling him Roland, and the narrator starts calling him the Gunslinger, giving us the exact moment he grew up, at odds with what he said before. I think that's amazing. I really love it. I do wonder about the world build. I wonder about magic's place in it. I'm a bit hazy. I can't really remember whether it's cleared up later on. We're given demons, the Oracle, Martin the Sorcerer, but also with reference to ancient things like petrol, atomics. Since this is set in the far future of some world, is magic just advanced and unrecognizable technology? Did it come from somewhere else? Did it cause the end of the world, or is it a product of it? I'm excited to see whether we get an answer to that, because I can't actually remember. Revised versus updated. So after the final novel came out in 2002, King revisited the original and made some changes to it. He added about 9,000 words, which equates to about 35 pages, and all of these changes, honestly, I think are for the better. The way I personally think is best to read this series is to read the original publication and then read the revised edition. But I think only reading the originals, there's a lot you will miss out on. It seems that maybe when King brought out this first novel, he didn't have an entirely concrete idea of where the series was going to go. And now in the newer editions, there's so much more in the way of connectivity to other books in the series. There's so much more in the way of foreshadowing. So I think if you're going to read one version of the story, read the new one. One thing I really like to think though, and this is heavy spoilers for the whole series, so really get gone, is that instead of this being a revision due to the cyclical, the wheel turns ending of the Dark Tower series, this could very well, the revised edition, be another iteration of Roland's journey. Tiny little differences and one step closer to his goal. If anyone is interested though, I do have access to both editions, and I'm thinking about doing a video just laying out every difference between the two, so if that's something you'd be interested in seeing, let me know. But thanks very much for watching this review. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Goodreads, which I'll link down below, and if you like sci-fi, join our Interstellar Book Club, which I'll link down below, and join our Stephen King Dark Tower read-along for this year. We're still in January, so you got loads of time. I'll link that in the description down below as well. It's on Discord. I'll see you soon for the next review. Bye!